The ghost ship. The sensor alarm cut through the quiet hum of the Valorian patrol cruiser like a blade through silk. Lieutenant Vexra's secondary eyes widened as she studied the readings on her console. Something had just appeared on the edge of their scan range, drifting in the void between star systems where nothing should exist. "Captain Drexus, we have an anomaly," she called across the bridge, her voice carrying the careful neutrality that came from 15 years of military service. "Unidentified vessel, bearing 327 Mark 18. It's not transmitting any identification codes." Captain Drexus rose from his command throne, his tall frame casting shadows across the pristine white surfaces of the bridge. The Valorian Empire had ruled this sector of space for 5,000 years, and in all that time very little surprised him anymore. His people had conquered 300 different species, cataloged every ship design, every weapon system, every method of faster-than-light travel known to exist. The Empire's knowledge was absolute. "Display," he commanded. The main view screen shimmered to life, showing a vessel tumbling slowly through space. It was small, perhaps a tenth the size of his cruiser. The design was unfamiliar, built with sharp angles and exposed framework that looked almost primitive compared to the flowing, organic designs of Valorian engineering. Scorch marks scarred its hull. Atmosphere vented from a dozen ruptures, freezing instantly into glittering clouds of ice crystals. "It's dying," observed Navigator Thrall from his station. "Power signatures are minimal. Life support has failed in most sections. If anyone is aboard, they won't be alive much longer." Drexus studied the vessel with growing curiosity. In his 30 years of service, he had encountered every known species in the Empire's vast database. This ship matched nothing he recognized. "Send a standard hail on all frequencies. If they can respond, I want to know who they are." They waited. Silence answered them, broken only by the soft electronic chirping of the bridge systems. The unknown ship continued its slow tumble, trailing debris like a dying comet. "Captain, I'm detecting faint power fluctuations from their data core," Vexra reported. "Whatever happened to them, some of their computer systems are still functional. We could board and extract their logs." Drexus considered this. The Empire's protocols were clear. Unknown vessels were to be investigated, cataloged, and either integrated into the Empire or destroyed if they proved hostile. This ship appeared to be neither threat nor opportunity, just another casualty of the vast and uncaring universe. Still, his curiosity was piqued. "Assemble a boarding team," he ordered. "Full environmental suits. Assume the atmosphere is compromised throughout. I want that data core intact." 20 minutes later, Drexus stood in the airlock of the alien vessel, his boots magnetized to the deck plating. His boarding team of 6 elite soldiers flanked him, their weapons ready despite the obvious lack of threat. Emergency lighting flickered weakly along the corridors, casting everything in a sickly red glow. The ship's interior was a maze of cramped passages and utilitarian design. No art adorned the walls, no decoration of any kind. Everything was functional, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. Drexus noticed strange details as they moved deeper into the vessel. The doorways were sized for beings roughly his height. The control panels featured symbols he had never seen, angular and precise. The temperature was cold, far colder than any species he knew preferred. They found the first body in what appeared to be an engineering section. It was humanoid, bipedal with 2 arms and a single head. The being's skin was pale, almost gray in the emergency lighting. It wore a torn uniform of some durable fabric. Drexus knelt beside it, his scanner analyzing the remains. "Interesting," he murmured. "The biological structure is remarkably similar to several species we know. Bilateral symmetry, carbon-based life form, similar organ placement. But the DNA structure is unique. I've never seen this particular configuration." "Captain, over here," called one of his soldiers. The data core was located in a heavily shielded section near the ship's center. Unlike the rest of the vessel, this room had maintained some integrity. The computers were still running, their displays showing streams of data in that same unknown script. Drexus's technician, a young Valorian named Kess, immediately set to work interfacing their systems with the alien computer. "This is going to take some time, sir," Kess reported. "Their data architecture is completely foreign. I'll need to build a translation matrix from scratch." "Do it," Drexus ordered. "I want to know everything. Who they were, where they came from, and what killed them." While Kess worked, Drexus explored further, He found more bodies, 11 in total. The ship had been designed to carry perhaps 20 at most. In what he assumed was the captain's quarters, he discovered something that made him pause. A star chart displayed on a wall screen that still had power. The chart showed constellations he recognized, but with notations he couldn't read. One section was marked with a symbol that appeared repeatedly throughout the ship. Captain Drexus. Kess's voice crackled over the communication link. I've managed to access some of their files. You need to see this. Drexus returned to the data core room. Kess had projected several holographic displays showing what appeared to be astronomical data, navigation logs, and ship specifications. What am I looking at? Drexus asked. This vessel is called a scout ship according to their classification system. It's designed for long-range reconnaissance and survey work. The species that built it calls themselves humans. That's a direct translation from their language databases. Kess pulled up more information. Captain, their technology is fascinating. They don't use antimatter drives like we do. Instead, they've developed something they call a quantum tunnel drive. It's less efficient than our systems, probably 50 years behind our current technology, but it's functional. 50 years behind us, Drexus repeated. So they're a younger species. Where is their homeworld? Kess's expression grew uncertain. That's where it gets strange, sir. According to their navigation logs, they departed from coordinates that correspond to a region of space we've surveyed extensively, Sector 9 null. But there's nothing there, sir. No habitable planets, no space stations, nothing. Just a few brown dwarf stars that don't even show up on most scans because they emit so little light. Drexus felt a cold sensation run down his spine. That's impossible. No species could survive in those conditions. There's no resources, no energy sources, nothing to sustain civilization. I know, sir, but their logs are very specific. They list departure points from coordinates in that region, multiple coordinates, actually, suggesting multiple installations or settlements. And there's more. Kess pulled up another display. Their ship was damaged in what they describe as a mapping accident, some kind of collision with debris traveling at high velocity. But before that happened, they had been conducting surveys of our outer territories for at least 6 months. They were spying on us, Drexus said slowly. It appears so, sir, though their notes suggest they were trying to avoid detection. They wanted to observe without being seen. Drexus studied the data with growing unease, a species living in the darkest, emptiest regions of space, a species that had been watching the Empire without the Empire knowing, a species with technology that, while inferior, was still capable of interstellar travel and reconnaissance. Are there more of them? He asked. Kess scrolled through more files. Their communication logs reference a fleet, sir. They were supposed to report back to something they call the Wanderer Collective after completing their survey, but they never made that report because of the damage to their ship. A fleet, Drexus repeated, in Sector 9 null. That's what the data suggests, sir. Drexus made his decision. Copy everything. Every file, every piece of data, every image. I want it all brought back to our ship for detailed analysis. Then we'll report this to High Command. The process took another 3 hours. When they finally returned to the patrol cruiser, Drexus immediately composed his report. He detailed everything they had found, every piece of evidence suggesting the existence of a previously unknown species living in the void. He marked it as priority classification and sent it through the fastest channels available. The response from High Command came back within a day. Drexus read it 3 times, unable to believe what he was seeing. They're dismissing it, he said to his first officer, a veteran named Sarix. High Command says the data is likely corrupted or fabricated. They claim no species could survive in Sector 9 null. They're classifying this as a minor curiosity, nothing more. Sarix's expression showed his own confusion. But sir, we brought back bodies. Physical evidence. The ship itself is in our cargo bay. I know. Drexus pulled up the star chart again, the one showing the mysterious marked region. They're making a mistake. Something is out there in the dark and it's been watching us. Over the following weeks, Drexus couldn't shake his unease. He requested permission to lead a survey mission into Sector 9 null. His request was denied. High Command had more important matters to attend to. The Empire was vast, and the discovery of one strange ship was hardly worth diverting resources from established priorities. But reports began to filter through the military network. Other patrol ships were encountering similar vessels, always damaged, always drifting, always abandoned or nearly so. The encounters were spread across vast distances, happening at the very edges of Imperial space. Each ship contained the same curious technology, the same references to the Wanderer Collective, the same navigation data pointing back to empty regions of space. Drexus compiled these reports, creating a map that showed every sighting. The pattern was unmistakable. The human ships were appearing along a vast arc that encompassed nearly a third of the Empire's outer boundary. It was as if someone was conducting a systematic survey of Imperial space, probing from multiple directions simultaneously. He sent his analysis to High Command again. This time he copied it to several admirals he knew personally, veterans who might listen where bureaucrats would not. The response was the same. Interesting but not concerning. The Empire had protocols for first contact with new species. When and if these humans decided to make themselves known, the Empire would deal with them appropriately. Drexus stood alone in his quarters, staring at the star map projected on his wall. Hundreds of systems, thousands of worlds, all under Valorian control. The Empire was mighty. Its fleets numbered in the tens of thousands, its armies beyond counting. Surely he was being paranoid. Surely High Command was right to dismiss the threat. But something deep in his gut told him otherwise. Something about the way those ships had been distributed. The systematic nature of their surveys, the deliberate choice to live in the darkness where no one would look. These were not the actions of refugees or explorers. These were the actions of something planning, preparing, watching. He pulled up the data from the human ship one more time, scrolling through the files Kess had recovered. There was one document they had struggled to translate fully. A text file that seemed to be some kind of historical record or cultural document. The translation software had managed only fragments, but one phrase stood out clearly. They took everything from us. We learned to live in nothing. And from nothing, we will take everything back. Drexus stared at those words for a long time. Then he sent one final message to High Command, marking it with the highest priority classification available to him. We are being watched by something that lives in the void, something that knows us while we know nothing of them, something that is patient, organized, and purposeful. I believe the Empire is in danger. Please authorize immediate deep space reconnaissance of Sector 9 Null and surrounding regions. The response came back within hours. His request was denied. His reports were noted but not acted upon. The Empire had more immediate concerns. Internal politics, border disputes with minor kingdoms, economic adjustments across hundreds of worlds. One captain's paranoia about ghost ships was not a priority. Drexus read the denial and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of his quarters. The Empire was blind, and somewhere in the darkness something was watching. Something that had been watching for far longer than anyone realized. Something that was about to make its presence known in ways that would shake the foundations of everything the Valorian Empire had built. In the void of Sector 9 Null, around brown dwarf stars that barely qualified as stellar objects, hidden in the cold and dark where sensors rarely looked, thousands of ships hung in silent formation. They had been there for generations, building, preparing, remembering. The scout ships had done their work. The surveys were complete. The Empire had been mapped in detail that its own citizens would find astonishing. And now, in the deep darkness of space, weapons systems began to activate. Drives began to warm. Crews that had spent their entire lives preparing for this moment moved to battle stations. The wait was over. The time had come. The Wanderer Collective was about to teach the Valorian Empire a lesson it would never forget. Those who lived in darkness saw everything. Those who sat in the light saw nothing at all. And that difference was about to decide the fate of civilizations. The unseen tide 6 months had passed since Captain Drexus filed his final report about the human ghost ships. 6 months of silence from High Command. 6 months of routine patrols. 6 months of the Empire continuing its inexorable march through history, as it had for 5 millennia. But across the vast expanse of Valorian space, something had begun to change. Small things at first, barely noticeable in an empire that spanned thousands of star systems. Admiral Korath stood in the Strategic Operations Center on the capital world of Valoria Prime, studying the holographic display that showed the entire empire in miniature. Red indicators had begun appearing across the map, with increasing frequency over the past month. Each one represented an incident, an anomaly, something that didn't quite fit the expected patterns of Imperial operations. "Show me the trade route disruptions again," he commanded, his forearms crossed in a gesture that his staff recognized as deep concentration. The display shifted, highlighting major shipping lanes that connected the Empire's industrial worlds to its agricultural centers, its mining operations to its manufacturing hubs. Over the past 30 days, 17 major convoys had experienced significant delays, ships arriving at wrong destinations, cargo manifests showing discrepancies, navigation systems experiencing momentary failures that sent vessels off course by thousands of kilometers. Each incident was investigated, reported Commander Zilth, Korath's chief of staff. Every single one was attributed to technical malfunctions or human error. The ship captains involved were disciplined. New safety protocols were implemented. Everything by the book, sir. And yet the incidents continue, Korath observed. His career spanned 40 years, and he had developed an instinct for patterns that others missed. Show me the communication relay failures. Another shift in the display. Communication satellites and relay stations formed a vast network across the Empire, allowing instantaneous communication between worlds separated by dozens of light years. In the past 6 weeks, 32 relay stations had experienced brief outages, none lasting more than a few minutes, all quickly repaired by automated systems. Technical glitches, Zilth said. Solar radiation, micrometeorite impacts, normal wear and degradation. Nothing unusual for a network of this size. Nothing unusual, Korath repeated slowly. Commander, overlay the trade disruptions with the communication failures. Zilth executed the command. The holographic display now showed both sets of incidents simultaneously. For a moment there appeared to be no connection. Random points of failure scattered across the vastness of Imperial space. But Korath had spent decades studying military strategy and recognizing patterns in chaos. Now show me every reported sighting of unknown vessels in the past year, he said, quietly. The display populated with new markers, ships matching the description of the human vessels that Captain Drexus had reported. Most were damaged or derelict, discovered by patrol ships or commercial traffic. Each one had been catalogued, studied, and ultimately dismissed as insignificant. The pattern became clear. Every communication failure, every trade disruption, every navigational anomaly occurred within 5 light years of a location where a human ship had been spotted. The correlation was undeniable once you knew to look for it. Get me every report filed about these human vessels, Korath ordered. I want to know everything. Every encounter, every piece of data recovered, every analysis performed. And I want it within the hour. Zilth moved quickly to comply. When the reports arrived, Korath spent the next 3 hours reading them in detail. Captain Drexus's files were the most comprehensive, but there were dozens of others. Minor patrol captains, merchant vessels, survey ships, all reporting encounters with strange vessels of unknown origin, always damaged, usually abandoned, occasionally with a few survivors who claimed to be refugees from destroyed colonies. One report caught his attention. A merchant captain named Vross had encountered a human ship 3 months ago. Unlike most reports, Vross had managed to establish brief communication with the vessel before it lost power completely. The humans had claimed their ship was damaged while fleeing from an attack, but Vross noted something odd in his report. The damage to the human ship appeared inconsistent with weapons fire. It looked more like controlled detonations, deliberately placed to disable specific systems while leaving others intact. As if they wanted to appear helpless, Vross had written, but when I offered to tow them to the nearest station, they refused, said they would handle repairs themselves. Then their communication system conveniently failed, and they drifted away into an asteroid field before I could assist further. Korath leaned back in his chair, his mind working through possibilities. An enemy that wanted to appear weak. An enemy that positioned damaged vessels throughout Imperial space. An enemy that seemed to be living in the darkest, most ignored regions of the galaxy. An enemy that was somehow connected to a pattern of technical failures and disruptions that was slowly, almost imperceptibly degrading the Empire's operational efficiency. Commander Zilth, he called out, I want a full fleet mobilization. Task Force Gamma, all 12 battle groups. I want them assembled and ready to deploy within 48 hours. Zilth's expression showed surprise. Sir, that's over 3,000 ships. May I ask what threat justifies such a response? The threat we can't see, Korath replied. The one living in the shadows while we look the other way. I'm going to Sector 9 Null and I'm going to find out what's really out there. The mobilization took exactly 46 hours. Task Force Gamma was the Empire's rapid response fleet, designed to handle major threats along the frontier. 12 battle groups, each consisting of 1 dreadnought, 20 cruisers, 50 destroyers, and 100 support vessels. It was enough firepower to conquer a small star nation or suppress a major rebellion. Korath led the fleet personally aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The journey to Sector 9 Null took 3 days at maximum faster-than-light speed. As they approached the region, Korath ordered maximum sensor sweeps. Every detection system the fleet possessed was pushed to its limits, searching for any sign of habitation or activity. The results were disappointing. Brown dwarf stars, barely warm enough to register on thermal sensors. No planets of any significance, just a few frozen rocks orbiting in the darkness. No energy signatures suggesting cities or space stations. No communication signals. No heat blooms from engines or reactors. No electromagnetic radiation that would indicate advanced technology. "It's empty, sir," reported the sensor officer after hours of intensive scanning. If there was ever anything here, it's long gone now. But Korath noticed something. Scattered throughout the region were trace elements of industrial activity, microscopic debris that suggested metal fabrication, chemical signatures that indicated fuel processing, radiation patterns consistent with reactor operation, all of it old, perhaps months or even years old, but present nonetheless. "Something was here," he said. "They've moved, but they left traces. Expand the search pattern. I want every cubic kilometer of this sector scanned." The fleet spread out, each battle group taking a different subsection of the vast, empty region. For 2 weeks they searched, finding more traces, more evidence of previous habitation, but nothing current. It was as if an entire civilization had simply packed up and vanished, leaving only the faintest echoes of their presence. Then the attacks began. The first strike hit Battle Group 7 while they were conducting a detailed survey of a particularly dense asteroid cluster. No warning. No energy signatures that would have indicated incoming weapons. One moment the battle group was proceeding normally. The next moment, 3 of their destroyers simply exploded. Secondary explosions followed as ammunition stores detonated, creating cascading failures that damaged nearby ships. "Report," Korath demanded, his voice cutting across the sudden chaos on the command deck. "Unknown weapons fire, sir. We're analyzing the damage patterns now. It appears to be kinetic strikes. Solid projectiles moving at extreme velocity. They came from the asteroid field itself. Return fire. Light up that entire region with every weapon we have." The battle group's plasma cannons opened up, turning thousands of asteroids into superheated vapor. But the enemy was already gone. By the time the Empire's sensors detected where the shots had originated, there was nothing there but cooling rock and expanding gas clouds. Over the next 72 hours, 4 more battle groups were hit. The pattern was always the same. Sudden kinetic strikes from extreme range, devastating damage, and by the time the fleet could respond, the attackers had vanished. The human ships, when they finally appeared on sensors, were nothing like the derelict vessels the Empire had been finding. These were warships, sleek and fast, built for hit-and-run tactics that exploited the Empire's reliance on close-range energy weapons. Korath quickly adapted his tactics. He ordered the fleet to maintain tighter formations, to keep their shields oriented toward potential threat vectors, to deploy sensor drones that could provide earlier warning of incoming attacks. But the humans adapted faster. They started using the brown dwarf stars themselves as cover, hiding in the minimal radiation these failed stars produced, making their ships nearly impossible to detect until they fired. The Empire's losses mounted. Not catastrophic, not enough to threaten the fleet's combat effectiveness, but steady and demoralizing. 20 ships destroyed, 40 damaged, and they had yet to successfully destroy a single human vessel. The humans were ghosts, striking from the darkness and vanishing before retaliation was possible. Then Korath received a message that changed everything. Not from his fleet, but from Valoria Prime. The capital world itself was under cyber attack. Nothing physical, no ships in orbit, no bombs or weapons, but the Empire's vast computer networks were experiencing cascading failures. Financial systems, administrative databases, military communication protocols, all experiencing corruption and data loss on a scale that suggested coordinated sabotage. "How is this possible?" demanded the Emperor in an emergency transmission. "Our networks have security measures that have been refined over thousands of years. No external force should be able to penetrate them. The answer came from the Empire's chief technology officer, a brilliant Valorian named Kestra. Your Majesty, the intrusion isn't external. It's internal. Someone has been inside our networks for months, possibly years, slowly planting code and creating backdoors. The attack we're experiencing now is just the activation of systems that were already in place. Whoever did this had intimate knowledge of our network architecture and unlimited time to prepare. Korath felt the pieces falling into place with terrible clarity. The damaged human ships scattered throughout Imperial space. The refugees who had been rescued and integrated into Imperial society. They hadn't been refugees at all. They had been infiltrators. Agents planted deliberately to gain access to the Empire's most secure systems. Recall the fleet, he ordered immediately. We're abandoning the search. The real threat isn't out here in the dark. It's already inside our borders, but even as he gave the order, more reports flooded in. Rebellions had erupted on 17 worlds simultaneously. Not random uprisings, but coordinated revolts that struck at Imperial garrisons with precise knowledge of their weaknesses. The species that the Empire had conquered centuries ago were rising up, and they were being armed and advised by humans who seemed to know everything about Imperial military doctrine and tactics. The jump back to Imperial space took 3 days. 3 days during which Korath watched his empire begin to burn. Trade routes collapsed as merchant captains refused to risk travel through regions experiencing attacks. Communication between sectors became sporadic as relay stations continued to fail. Military forces found themselves responding to crises across hundreds of worlds simultaneously, stretched too thin to be effective anywhere. When Task Force Gamma emerged from faster-than-light travel near Valoria Prime, they found a scene that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. The capital world's orbital defenses were on full alert. Military vessels from a dozen different fleets had been recalled to protect the heart of the Empire. And approaching from multiple vectors were human ships, not hundreds but thousands. An armada that appeared from nowhere, emerging from faster-than-light travel in perfect coordination. How many? Korath asked, though he could count the sensor returns himself. 4,317 confirmed contacts, sir, his tactical officer reported. They're spreading out into attack formations. Multiple ship types from small frigates to vessels matching our dreadnought classifications. Admiral, where did they come from? How did they build a fleet this size without us knowing? Korath understood now. The humans had never lived on planets. They were nomadic, a civilization built on ships and mobile stations hidden in the darkest regions of space where the Empire never looked. While the Empire built grand cities on worlds and celebrated their mastery of the galaxy, humanity had been living in the cold void, building, planning, waiting. All ships, battle stations, he ordered. This is what they wanted. To draw our fleets here, to make us commit everything to defending the capital while their forces run wild across the Empire. It's a trap, but we have no choice. If Valoria Prime falls, the Empire falls. The human fleet didn't charge in recklessly. They maintained their distance just at the edge of effective weapons range for the Empire's plasma cannons. Then they opened fire with their kinetic weapons, filling space with a storm of metal projectiles accelerated to relativistic velocities. The Empire's energy shields, designed to deflect plasma and lasers, proved far less effective against solid matter moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Ships died. Dreadnoughts that had served the Empire for centuries were torn apart by impacts that released more energy than nuclear weapons. Cruisers exploded as their reactor cores were breached. Destroyers simply vanished, disintegrated by the concentrated firepower of dozens of human vessels focusing their fire. But the Empire fought back. They had numbers, experience, the pride of 5,000 years of unbroken dominance. Korath coordinated the defense with all the skill of his 4 decades of service, organizing firing patterns that forced the human ships to maneuver, creating overlapping fields of fire that caught the faster vessels when they tried to press their advantage. The battle raged for 18 hours. By the end, both fleets had taken horrific casualties. The Empire lost over 1,000 ships. The humans lost perhaps 300. But the humans could afford to trade at those ratios. They had spent generations preparing for this single conflict, building their fleet with the sole purpose of destroying the Empire. The Empire, comfortable in its dominance, had built ships for prestige and intimidation, as much as for war. As the human fleet withdrew in good order, Korath received a transmission. It was broadcast on open channels, meant not just for him, but for every ship in the system. every station, every person on Valoria Prime itself. The face that appeared on screen was human. Female, with dark skin and eyes that burned with an intensity that made Korath's blood run cold. "I am Fleet Commander Sarah Chen of the Wanderer Collective," she said. 500 years ago, your empire destroyed our world. You didn't know its name. You didn't bother to record the species you exterminated. We were just in the way of your expansion, so you eliminated us and moved on. You forgot we ever existed." She leaned forward and her voice became hard as the void itself. "But we remembered. We survived in the darkness you never bothered to explore. We built a civilization in the cold and the emptiness. We raised generations who knew nothing but waiting, preparing, learning everything about you while you learned nothing about us. And now we're here to teach you a lesson that your empire will never forget." The transmission ended. Korath sat in his command chair, surrounded by the wreckage of what had been the greatest fleet in the galaxy. Around him, damage reports continued to pour in. The empire was bleeding from 1,000 wounds, each one carefully inflicted by an enemy that had studied them for centuries. "Contact High Command," he said quietly. "Tell them we need every available ship, every reserve force, every military asset the Empire possesses. Because what we just fought wasn't their main fleet. It was a raiding force. The real invasion is about to begin." In the darkness beyond Valoria Prime's sensor range, Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship and smiled. The Empire had committed everything to defending their capital world, just as predicted, which meant their border regions were now virtually undefended. And in those border regions were the industrial worlds that supplied the Empire's war machine, the mining operations that provided raw materials, the shipyards that built their vessels. She opened a channel to the rest of the Wanderer Collective fleet. 300 ships had engaged the Empire at Valoria Prime. 3,000 more were even now emerging from the dark spaces, moving to strike at targets across the length and breadth of Imperial space. Targets they had spent 5 centuries identifying, mapping, and preparing to destroy. "All forces, execute Phase 2, she commanded. "Begin systematic elimination of Imperial infrastructure. No mercy, no quarter. They taught us that lesson 500 years ago. Now we teach it back." Across the Empire, on 1,000 worlds and 100 orbital installations, the humans who had infiltrated Imperial society over the past years received their activation codes. They stopped pretending to be refugees. They stopped being invisible, and they began the work they had been trained for since birth. The systematic dismantling of everything the Valorian Empire had built. The Empire would fight back. It was vast, powerful, with resources beyond counting, but it was also blind, arrogant, and utterly unprepared for an enemy that had spent half a millennium learning every weakness, every vulnerability, every flaw in the grand machine of Imperial might. The war had begun, and the Valorian Empire, which had stood for 5,000 years, had perhaps months left before it ceased to exist. Because the humans hadn't come to conquer, they had come to end it, completely, utterly, and forever. The void had risen up to consume the light, and nothing would remain but lessons written in ashes across 1,000 dead worlds.